Okay, we're gonna cover Professor William Ruddiman's research on the Ruddiman hypothesis, and I want to thank somebody commenting on my YouTube channel about William Ruddiman. I had not known, I had heard about this idea, but I had not known about his. It was a specific hypothesis of his that has been debated in the global warming science community, but he feels like he's won the debate. It just hasn't really been totally accepted yet. So the basic idea is that anthropogenic global warming started early with the start of agriculture spreading around the world. So he's using examining ice core climate data and archaeological evidence and ancient pollen samples. And so by 8000 BCE, agriculture started to spread into Europe. And then he mentioned these, they used stone axes to clear or flint axes to clear the forests at first. This intrigued me because I'm like, okay, I've cut trees down with a bow saw and stuff, and so how are they doing it with a flint axe? And so he basically gave the same talk. There's like 3 different versions of his talk on YouTube. So here he's talking about the early spread of agriculture around the earth after the Holocene started. And so his hypothesis, his claim is that this started anthropogenic global warming right here due to deforestation. And he trained as a marine geologist, but now he's considered like a paleoclimatologist because of this Ruddiman hypothesis. And so these are the axes, the flint axes that were used in Europe to do the deforestation. So later on I'll get into how specifically it was done because William Ruddiman explains that. So these are a couple of the talks that he gave. It's basically the same talk. And then he points out how, well, if you ask the public, 55% of the public thinks scientists are still, quote, debating global warming. And he says that the Koch brothers are, quote, a major villains. And then he points out that the ExxonMobil scientists knew by 1980, but then ExxonMobil stifled the scientists on the global warming, and it's a case of, quote, follow the money. Which is ironic because if you read some of the comments, they're trying to claim that, oh, because he has a PhD, he makes too much money and blah, blah, blah. No, just because somebody has a PhD doesn't mean they make too much money. So here he is tracing the spread of early farming into Europe. So you can see this is like basically like 6,000, 8,000 years ago, like I said, since it's like basically 20,000 AD, 2000 AD now, so that's 8,000 years ago you got it spread. And now I cite this in my 2012 book. I talk about the archaeological evidence proving there was already an ecological crisis due to deforestation, mainly to waterproof their housing using cement from lime ash in the Near East and Anatolia and stuff. And so then that caused, already there was drought from that deforestation, and so then the farming spread into Europe. And that was also like the first white people, light-skinned people, from the lack of vitamin D in the wheat monocultural diet. So here's his book that he had published with this hypothesis. Actually, I think it's 2015. I ordered the book 2016 is when it was published, so yeah. Winner of the 2006 book award. Oh, so this is the later edition. It already got republished. I don't know what edition I got. Hopefully I got a later edition. I'll have to check my order. Okay, so it's kind of interesting because he was debated by one of the famous oceanographers who could not believe that a small human population level would actually start causing global warming, because they thought, well, the ocean cycles would be greater effect than, because with the end of the Holocene, the ocean cycles would cause the Younger Dryas event, where it got cold all of a sudden. But so you had this debate. And he also talks about the debate about the supposed pause in global warming that occurred from 1998. And that was also due to changes in the El Nino, but it also had to do with the Arctic ice, because the Arctic was soaking up the heat. And now almost all the multi-year ice is gone in the Arctic. So you have a phase change in the amount of energy that's needed to absorb into, to heat up the atmosphere and the water compared to melting the ice, because that's why the Arctic is the air conditioner for the planet, as the albedo effect. So they've proven that, that was one of the dips in global temperature rise. Okay, so then he also later challenges this Anthropocene era, is because it's not like when you study geology, you have a distinct type of way of aging based on the geological record as subdivisions in the standard geological columns. So he's just saying that the Anthropocene is more informal and should be a small letter A and not a capital geological era, just because it's not completely global at the same time. It's like a time transgressive development. At any rate, he pretty much agrees with it. It's just kind of like pointing out that technically it's not really a geological era. And so then you have the Ruddiman hypothesis again is that the baseline human effects on climate started earlier, and the total effect is therefore larger because it's cumulative CO2 in the atmosphere. And so then in his talk, he says, this is getting somewhere beyond alarming. It's way worse than I ever thought. I've probably driven you into terminal depression, but I leave you with the facts. What else could I do? So here you have, this guy is a top-level geologist. He won like the top geology award in science. I think it was the Lyle Award or something like that. So even he's like would be considered a doomer by a lot of other global warming scientists, but he's just following the evidence, and he's doing this interdisciplinary data analysis, and then he retires. He's retired so he can talk like this because he's already retired. So then there was, like I said, there was like heated debate about his claim, so there's other people that have investigated his claim, and they basically have corroborated his claim. So this was one of the debates in 2006. I don't know. I wonder how much his book got revised when it got reissued. But at any rate. So again, they're using this interdisciplinary analysis with the pollen database, and ice cores and all that. So he shows these. He says that when he was he gives he gives a talk for his class of 1964 at his undergraduate post-secondary school, William College in Massachusetts, and he gives like the class graduation talk on. He's covering his research. So he posts this. He says when he was in school, they were still debating continental drift and plate tectonics, and that's what Naomi Oreskes did her first book on. So I'm hoping he read her book. I should email him. He'd probably appreciate that question. So he uses this slide to just point out that you already had anthropogenic global warming. Now, so this is where I realized, well, hold on a second, because this is precisely the time frame that got completely fixated on by the debunkers, by the big oil propaganda. And my neighbor actually clued me into this because he was, repeating this propaganda. So I did a big blog post on this already about that specific time frame, and this is before I knew about William Ruddiman's research. So I had no idea that they were. Well, basically what they did is they combined a bunch of different graphs to try to misrepresent the information. So this is the misinformation graph, as they're trying to claim that the Little Ice Age was way below. So this is 2000 AD, years before present. So it's 10,000 years, the past 10,000 years. Yeah. So you can see he doesn't even have that in there. He doesn't have that range of. Right. So this is where they combine all these different graphs. I go into the whole detail of how they erred when they combine these graphs together. So the last 10,000 years. So anyway, I'm not going to repeat that research. 10,000 years before present thousands. Okay. All right. So just pointing out that and then I emailed a prominent researcher on this, Professor Cuffey. Okay. So anyway, I'm just wondering that since he gave these prominent talks, that they targeted this graph to try to debunk it with their disinformation. I'm just pointing that out, that's possible. That's a strong possibility. So here he finally explains, well, when the stone axe were used, what they did was they girdled the trees, and then the trees would die, and then when the trees fell down, they were then set on fire, and that's how they spread the first agriculture into Europe. So that's pretty interesting that these stone axes weren't actually like cutting down the tree. They were just taking the bark off the tree by girdling it. So that makes sense, because at first I'm like, well, how do they do it, Okay, so then he's like, okay, well, if you had just the natural cycle of the ice ages, it'd be cooling down on Earth right now. So his point is like, because of the farming as deforestation, an increase in methane and CO2 from burning, you have this offset of warming, and then it really spiked up from the industrialization the past 50 years. The rate has just increased. So then he says in this other talk, I don't have much faith that humans are going to do all that much. We have, for instance, in the US, individuals have done heroic things. Cities and states have done good things. Government, well, you know what the government's doing? The government's not doing much. And deep down, I used to be an idealist. Now I've aged into a gentle cynic. I think we're very giving up to a point. Then past that point, we're really quite selfish. So this is a profound statement he's making about like humanity as a culture. I don't think we're going to sacrifice our way back into minimal carbon emissions enough to keep a major warming from happening. My hope, though, is that technology, which is a bad word in some circles, that technology will bail us out. If something came up with a battery that stored 10 times as much power for 10 times as long as any existing battery, it would change things in a major way. Suddenly solar would become a phenomenal thing. So there was just a video posted about China having the EV battery breakthrough. But the problem is that the have batteries just hit their exponential curve. So the problem is that we need to also have a negative carbon reduction. We need to sequester carbon to reverse the damage already caused, and so that can really only be done by algae, because algae using photosynthesis is by far the fastest means to sequester carbon. There is a possibility that maybe like metamaterials could be used as technology, but I don't know. So that's where I'm leaving it for now. And yeah, so in terms of the renewable energy, William Rees, as I already blogged on or posted a video on, that it takes so much copper and rare metals needed. So, I mean, I know you could potentially like recycle the copper from the waste dumps around the planet, but obviously, you know, it would take a huge effort to try to minimize the damage already being done. But we're going to be hitting collapse of global food supply very soon because of as the warming increases. So we can see, like, if we go to Arctic News, record high increase in carbon dioxide. So in contrast to any kind of reduction from renewable energy or whatever, you know, it's like even though renewable energy use, the EV vehicles have like increased by 24% or something like that, it's not helping. It's and so the problem is you get this positive feedback from the Arctic methane emissions that can be kicked off very easily because the Arctic ice is so much lower, and there's this pressurized methane hydrates in the world's largest ocean shelf, and that gets completely ignored by all the like MIT renewable energy geeks. So yeah, the cloud tipping points will start kicking in soon, and that will like spike the temperature increase. And that's based on CO2 equivalent. So the tipping point could be crossed much earlier than 2030, just because when you have that methane feedback, methane could be doubled soon in the atmosphere because there's an abrupt eruption that's very probable from the pressurized methane in the permafrost in the world's largest ocean shelf. Destabilized methane hydrates contain the sediments at the seafloor of the Arctic Ocean. Such a methane would cause a dramatic increase. And so this could happen if the trend continues. It would happen by September 2026 because that would be the Arctic low ice. If we do get that abrupt eruption next year, this could be a vast acceleration of global warming. And so, yeah, so the whole effort on just like renewable energy it's ignoring first of all, the aerosol masking effect is twice as bad as previously thought. So even if you had a 40% decrease in burning coal and diesel, you'd still have a temperature increase by another 1 degree Celsius global average. And that causes the Arctic to warm up much faster because you're reducing the albedo effect. And so this Arctic amplification is then changing the jet stream, slowing it down and amplifying it, and that's what's the main cause in driving the extreme weather that's threatening growing food at scale in the interior of the continents, because they're like 5 degrees warmer than the rest of the planet on average in Fahrenheit. So this is February to March, and then yeah, 2 meter temperature. Okay. I don't know if you reposted the same thing. I'm trying to see the difference between these. Oh, these are different satellite. Right. Okay, so the other thing then is that we could be entering another El Nino very soon, and each El Nino gets stronger. Yeah, so the next year is going to be quite dramatic. So here's the Arctic ice volume right now. It's at record low. So if we see down here, we're looking at, it's supposed to be if you get below 1,000 kilometers in volume, then what they're calling that the blue ocean event, but it's really sort of like a nonlinear amplification. So there's no like strict line that you cross. It's just a continuum that's constantly amplifying. But you can see how this could easily, if you plot that down, it could easily get to the blue ocean events next year is what they're saying, because if it gets low this year, then easily by next year. And so even with just a 3 degree Celsius global average rise, it would then spike everything else and amplify it so much that it would cause biological annihilation across the planet. Yeah, so not a very cheery Earth Day message.